Okay, we're probably going to have more folks join. And so as more folks come on board, we can go ahead and start with some introductions and kind of get this party started. And so I want to go ahead and start by saying thank you for coming. Today, we're going to talk about how to really think about work-based learning programs that support all of your learners. And so really thinking through those strategies and those effective ways of making sure that learners are getting the types of programs they need in order to really support their long-term success. And so we'll go ahead and start with some introductions of folks. I'll start with Dr. Adrian Hogebrook. I'm really excited that he's able to join us today as part of the discussion. For folks who don't know Dr. Hogebrook, he's a recognized leader in strategy, growth, policy, and transformational change in global higher education and the nonprofit sector. He's worked in higher education and nonprofit for over 30 years, not 30 decades, 30 years. And he's really driven by that commitment to expand access, equity, and opportunity for all of our learners. He is currently the founder and principal of Quinta Essentia Ventures, which is a consultancy dedicated to equipping social sector organizations with strategies to achieve greater impact and scalability. Prior to this, he was with Southern New Hampshire University as the executive vice president and managing director for social impact. And Dr. Hogebrook has an incredible background, just lots of incredible work and experiences he's done, where he's also been on TED and completed a TED Talk in 2021, which was 3 ways to lower the barriers for higher education. If you have not seen that, I highly recommend you do see that. It is a very, very good TED Talk. And so then also presenting with us today, we have Josh Mitchell, which is a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience focusing on sales leadership, academic partnerships, and institutional growth. He is currently the vice president of academic partnerships at Ripen, and he collaborates with institutions and partners to scale and manage experiential and work-based learning programs, really thinking through how do we drive student engagement and workforce readiness. Previous to this, Josh served as the Senior Director of Sales at OpenLMS, and he was the Vice President of Sales at eThink Education. And then I'm Mara Woody. I come with 20 years of experience in higher education, working at public and private institutions, also in the government sector as the Assistant Commissioner for Post-Secondary Policy for the state of Missouri, where I was really able to see the deep need of resources for our institutions to do the work that's expected of them today. So from there, I left to go to a foundation to really be able to think of that intersection of higher education and workforce development. And now at Ripen, I'm the Director of Strategic Partners, where I continue that work of thinking not only do we, how do we really work with our partners to create impact for our learners, but how do we also really create impact for our partners and help them with the needed resources to be successful today and to meet the demands of today. So I'm very excited to be able to meet with everybody and have this discussion. And this discussion is around, I think we're going to go to the next slide, maybe. This discussion is really around new learners. What are new learners? What are ways to think about serving new learners today, especially around work-based learning? And really, how are some strategies that can be really effective? How can we implement those in order to really think about what we can do to serve today's learners and really be able to walk away with actionable strategies? We'll also have opportunities for questions, so please ask questions throughout. And also, we'll have a discussion toward the end of this as well, which we're really looking forward to. So I believe, because we love experiences and actually having interaction in our meetings, we're going to start with a question for everybody. And so of these challenges that are listed, what is the main challenge that your institution is facing in serving your adult learners' needs? And we recognize, or your learners' needs, we recognize the challenges could be an endless list. They can go on for eternity. But of these that we've listed, which one is the one that you are struggling with the most on your campus right now? And we'll give a couple of seconds for folks to answer that. I'm trying to think, how long should we give? Josh, do we have a sense how many more?
10 more seconds. Lock it in.
Okay, so got 10 more seconds to make a response. What is the biggest challenge that you're working with right now? And let's go ahead and call it. Okay, so What are those results? Okay, it looks like the largest challenge is offering flexible and accessible experiential learning programs for all learners, which fortunately is what we're talking about today. We did not plant that answer to lead up to this, but that's great that folks are here really to try to think through what are the best ways that we can serve the needs of our learners today. And so if we'll go ahead and start the PowerPoint slide again, Josh, let's start with kind of some level setting first on what exactly is a new learner. As we talk about here, there are a lot of phrases for what we use today for what our learners look like on our campuses. And is the PowerPoint actually up, Josh? Oh, it is? Okay, cool. I must be in presenter view. And so you hear a lot of phrases. There's post-traditional, there's contemporary, there's modern, there's new, unfortunately, you still hear non-traditional thrown out as a way to describe our learners of today. And so what we're kind of level setting around is the idea that all of these learners are what we call the new learner. And what it means to be a new learner, which is interchangeable with contemporary or modern or post-traditional, is really they have at least one of these characteristics that is traditionally considered the non-traditional. Non-traditional as the nomenclature is kind of falling out of favor because it's more deficits based. When we talk about our learners and their readiness and their ability to be successful, it makes it sound as if there's something with them that is creating that barrier. When we recognize the real change needs to happen within education as we think about how to serve a more diverse learning body than we have before. And so the different types of characteristics we can see are they could be independent students, they are either a caregiver or they have dependents that they care for, they could have some sort of alternative high school completion such as a GED or a high set, which is where I'm from in Missouri. They could have a delayed post-secondary enrollment, which would traditionally not necessarily be just a gap year. It could be, but there also could be, they could be 10 years since they've last attended some sort of educational programming. They could be a part-time learner, and they are usually employed and they're balancing multiple priorities. A couple others are they're justice involved, they are former foster youth. There's all kinds of different types of indicators. That means these are students that may have different levels of need than what campuses have been able to work with in the past. A phrase I really like that a colleague of mine at WashU recently used, Sean Armstrong, he called them and learners. They are something and a learner. And usually that something is the priority over learning. And so as the educational institutions, we need to recognize that there are other priorities competing for their time, their energy, their space, their resource. And so how do we make education accessible in that context to these learners? And so a couple of facts as we talk about what education does to empower individuals to have successful lives, to serve their communities, to be part of communities that thrive. A lot of that is preparation. It's hard to be a committed community member if you're not really able to pay the rent or you're not able to put food on the table tonight. So part of what that college experience is preparation for the entire world, which includes professional and personal. And so a lot of what we see in our learners today is that they need education to be that highway, that on-ramp, where sometimes I can come to school for this and I can do 6 months of this, but then I need to further focus on other areas. But then I want to come back because I'm ready for the next phase of my education and the next phase of my career. And so really thinking of education as that highway with the often on-ramps that can support lifetimes for individuals, not just that traditional 4 years that we think about as one small time frame, one small component of their entire life. And so within that and being able to support those educational needs throughout a lifetime, we also think about how do you support those educational needs as they relate to career readiness and career preparation. We know 90% of our learners today are coming to college because they want to be able to have careers that they love and careers where they can create impact in the communities around them. And so part of that, that we're finding more and more through research and just best practices is the high impact practice of experiential learning. And so we see incredible demand by learners for experiential learning. In fact, here a Strata report, or sorry, a Business Higher Education Forum report found that 8.2 million learners wanted an internship, but only 3.6 million actually received one. That's less than half. And so just thinking, what does that mean? How does that play out? What does that show? What we find is that if you don't have those opportunities for experiential learning in college, then the internship experience that you see being able to participate in an internship reduces your risk of underemployment by almost 50%. And so for everyone who doesn't get access to it, that increases that risk of underemployment after college. And we know if you start out after college underemployed, 10 years later, you're more likely to still be underemployed. And so when we think about traditional programs, those programs that are maybe that full-time internship or full-time apprenticeship model, those serve a specific student very well. But when we think about those learners today who are balancing caregiving, maybe they don't have transportation, they might have full-time jobs, they're trying to be students. How do we think about work integrated learning or experiential learning opportunities that can fit within their lives and still give them those valuable opportunities they need to be able to really be successful in their careers moving forward? We also know that those more traditional models of experiential learning are very resource intensive for employers. And so trying to think through how do we create models of experiential learning in which all employers can engage and all students can engage. 99% of our businesses in the United States are small and medium businesses. And so that's the least amount of participation we see from employers in traditional internship and apprenticeship models. So how do we create programs that are inclusive of them as well, so they can also gain those valuable opportunities and insights from experiential learning? And so this is where the gaps exist right now in the development of and the placement of learners into experiential learning opportunities. And that's why it's really important that as educators, we think about how do we make sure we create programs that all learners can take advantage of. And so that's where I really want to kick it over to Dr. Hogebrook, who has extensive background in serving all learners and in a diversity of learners. And so really for us to glean some insights and some actionable strategies. And so Adrian, I'll kick it over to you.
Great. Mara, thank you. I was a little surprised that I'd been in the field for 30 decades. Sort of makes me like the Moses of higher education, I guess, but I'll take that. I'll take that. So thank you tremendously for the time, and I want to appreciate all of you who have joined this webinar for some very insightful and impactful data and information. We look forward to your engagement. I'm going to frame up a few things in the time that I have that I hope position this in a way that that adds sort of the color and the texture to the goals of this webinar, and then that then sort of segues into some practical ways for us to understand how to deepen the experience, really localizing the learner, the student at the center of all of this work. And one way that it does it for me is I think about my own father. And for those of you who do go to the TED Talk, you'll actually see I actually start my TED Talk talking about my father's experience. My father was a non-traditional or a new learner before there was even nomenclature for what that was. And I remember my father, when I was in high school, going back to college to earn his degree after having, gone off to college right after high school, spending less than a year going into the military, retiring from the military, and making the decision to go back to college to further his career and livelihood. And I still remember him coming home after class or coming home after work, setting up a little card table in his bedroom, in my mother's bedroom, where he had his books laid out. And he was having to go back and forth to class and really trying to engage, trying to find all the competencies and credits and credentials that he had gained through the military, trying to find ways to transfer those elements into his work. Anyway, that becomes the texture, that becomes the color for how I think about this work. And it's interesting that we here we find ourselves, some 40 years later, and now we have nomenclature, and we're still grappling with some of the very challenges. So the way that I'm going to set this up is, and really talking about in the way that Mara just laid this out, I'm not going to hit on all the points that you see on the slides, but I want to hit on some key points that focus first on what are the opportunities and the challenges for new learners in this environment. How do we think about it from the employer context? And then how do we think about it in terms of online and digital? And so what are those opportunities? And so what are some of those challenges? And so even as you see these opportunities and challenges that are laid out under the name of the new learners, these transcend all learners, but there's some acute differences as it relates to our new learners. And so comparing and contrasting in this way, And so when we look at the opportunities for new learners, just a couple of things that I'll point out here. Many of these you can assume, many of these points we know, but a couple of things that I'll build out here. So under the practical applications and skills, an outcome of this, if done well, and it creates that opportunity, is it reinforces the learning that learner has gained through the application of the skills or work that they've done to really improve and enhance retention. Under the career advancement label, it's an opportunity for industry recognized credentials to help drive promotion and career shifts. And so we understand that. The income while learning, a big opportunity here is that it allows the learner to both maintain and potentially enhance their earnings relative to quality of life. And so often that we think about when we think about these experiences, we think about what they take away or the deficit that it creates within for the learner or for that learner's family. Here is an opportunity to really add value to it. And then under the skill development aligned with industry needs, this really speaks to the relevancy and the employability for the learner. And then under the challenges.
Adrian,
Yep.
I have a question around, you had mentioned that it is able to help advance retention. Can you speak a little bit more, unpack that a little bit more, like why and exactly how that plays together?
Yeah, so what it does is think about those times when you have taken coursework or done an experience or an internship, and you're like, you know, I already know this and I can demonstrate my competency in doing this, but you have to go through it because there's no way to evaluate that or provide credit for it. And so the practical application of the skills means that there's an opportunity for that skill or those set of skills to be recognized, and being recognized and being getting credit for that then decreases your time towards the experience, which actually helps to lower costs. It actually helps to motivate and encourage the learner. And so it reinforces the fact that you have those skills or those competencies. And so that's the practical application aspect of it. Okay.
Awesome.
So under the challenges, again, I'll hit on just a few of these. So when you look at the access to opportunities, in some cases, there are limits to certain industries, either by region, by focus, or by skill set that reduces or produces barriers, particularly to certain industries or to certain fields. And so it would be great if every field had all kinds of experiences for us, but we realize that there's an underrepresentation. And this gets to a point that I'll mention later that Mara's already spoken to, which is the fact that there are complexities in many of the businesses or employers are small to medium size. And so that degree of complexity to provide such structure oftentimes is a capacity issue or a capability issue. Another set of issues that you see on here, limited academic credit or credentialing. Again, this gets to the lack of available systems to actually assess and provide credit or provide some level of demonstration or assessment that the credential has been or the skill set has been achieved. And so the takeaway from this slide would be that obviously there are great opportunities and it comes with challenges, but these challenges often speak to structural, financial, and accessibility challenges, not accessibility just from a physical aspect of it, but being able to access a wide variety of experiences that really relate to the experience that the employer as well as the learner is looking for. So if we could go to the next slide. Again, you'll see some commonalities between the opportunities and challenges for the employers, but a couple things that I would note here. And one, for those institutions that are looking to partner more strongly with employers, you could actually take this opportunity box and build a value proposition for this, for the potential employer. And so under the talent pipeline and development, it's an opportunity for employers to really hone in on job-specific skills. And so building projects and experiences that really speak to the needs within the employer, that actually then becomes a way to actually build a workforce pipeline into that organization or into that employer. And again, for those that are employed by the company, it becomes an employee retention tool. And then the other piece that I'll focus on here is around strengthening the employer brand and community engagement. Again, huge opportunities here, being seen as a leader in workforce development, being a stronger partner in partnerships. For those of you who are, as we know, if we've worked in higher education and post-secondary, how sometimes difficult it can be to actually manage and develop and cultivate partnerships with employers. And so from an employer perspective, it helps to really build the partner aspect of the partnership. And then obviously it has some reputational kudos that go along with that. On the challenger side, we've already mentioned one, which is the complexity of program design. Again, having the right kind of capacity and expertise to actually facilitate such experiences. And then on the last bullet, relative to compliance, liability, and financial considerations, this is where legal issues, liability, labor laws, being able to navigate many of these complexities for some employers and could be a challenge. And so the takeaway here is having structured programs with flexibility, adequate planning, and the appropriate investments for employers can actually help seed great opportunities and great experiences for learners.
So, Adrian, I want to take a second here because we have another question. This one really relevant to what you're talking about now. It
Sure.
might be a bit of a question that both Josh and Adrian can answer, but it's, can you talk to specific examples of successful models that bring in small and medium businesses? And what are some effective ways to integrate small and medium businesses into experiential learning programs? What makes these initiatives work, knowing the barriers that they face? And so I'll open it up. Really, I'll kind of start with, that's one of the things that Ripen actually works towards, is when you read the Business Higher Education Forum report that I referenced earlier, and we can put a link to that in the chat, it really discusses those barriers for small and medium businesses, such as filling out the paperwork if you're hiring a position, trying to be able to onboard and train new staff. And so our model is really a project-based model where we take on some of that, what we're going to call more the mundane tasks of, if there are stipends, we will be the payer of record for those stipends on behalf of the businesses, and really thinking through how do you eliminate their barriers. I'll open it up also to Adrian and Josh to add to that as well.
Yeah, I'll just add sort of two elements to that. So one, Mara, you've already spoken to, is the administrative aspect of it. Is strong partnerships will find ways to balance the administrative details that you just talked about. And then the second part for me is where employers can lean on institutions and organizations to actually help build the learning model and understand the needs around flexibility, the evaluation and the assessment of skill sets, and then the appropriate credentialing that goes with that. What I've seen over the years is that oftentimes employers in higher ed institutions or post-secondary institutions are saying the same thing, but they're using different language. And so it's, how do you actually bridge that language barrier to understand, oh, this is the skill set that got it. This is how we evaluate it. This is how we prove competency.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add that I'll talk a little bit more about this when I share more about how Ripen works. But the majority of the industry partners that we have on Ripen are small and medium-sized organizations, nonprofits. So our model really is one that works quite well for them. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly.
Adrian, back to
Great.
you.
Yep. Thank you. And so I'm going to bridge this with talking about it from the perspective of an online or digital environment. And again, not going to hit all of these bullets, but I think the key takeaway here is that the unique opportunity that that online or digital provides is the opportunity to build highly flexible and scalable models for work-based learning. And it really speaks to the needs and the demands of learners and also can speak to the needs and the demands of institutions as well as the employers. And so all the things that you see on here are, again, you can make some pretty accurate assumptions about what happens there. The thing that I will mention in terms of the limited hands-on experiences and practical application that in some digital environments it does not provide is if you think about certain skills or certain fields, you may have a digital online component to it, but it doesn't give you the exact practical application that you need. So, for example, if you think about surgical training, if you think about welding, if you think about heavy machinery or culinary arts, there are aspects of it that you can learn and design around the online experience, but then there are aspects of this work that require situational awareness or dexterity or the understanding and the balance of motion and things like that. And so that might be places there may be places where a completely online experience may not provide the depth that's needed, but it could truly be a complement to that. So again, the key takeaway here is the opportunity to build flexible and scalable models. The last piece that I'll just offer here in terms of on the next slide, relative to the employers, again, you can make some keen assumptions about here. The piece that I'll focus on is the adaptability and rapid upskilling. Here's an opportunity for employers, regardless of size, to really embrace and engage learners in work-based learning around new technologies, how to really speak very quickly and pivot very quickly around industry trends, and then really provide that continuous learning opportunity. And so the adaptability within the employer to be able to say, this is the pivot, these are the skills, this is what's relevant. You can do that in some very quick and dynamic ways in an online and digital experience. And so the last thing that I'll focus on in this next slide is really thinking about it from kind of an ecosystem approach. And I know that Josh is going to talk a little bit about this as well from the Ripen perspective. But on this next slide, you'll see the perspective that I come from and that many of us come from is this learner-centric perspective. And so how do you think about an ecosystem from the student perspective or learner perspective, from the employer perspective, from the institution perspective, where you can do this work in a way that literally keeps the student or the learner at the center of your paradigm. And again, this is a visual to help illustrate that. But thinking about this in terms of from an academic perspective, thinking about the flexibility, thinking about the modality, thinking about the content, thinking about the assessment and the evaluation. How do you understand this in the totality of this ecosystem where you have strategies, you have systems approaches, you have structures and synergies? They're not compartmentalized. You actually build that around the learner so that it creates the kind of design that allows for the flexibility, that allows for the employer, for the learner and the institution to work in concert around the learner in this new learner paradigm. And then both as inputs and outputs and outcomes are related to it is where you see the interdependence of the systems, the collaboration that's needed that helps to foster and mediate the work that needs to be done, the adaptability that you've heard me talk about. But then there's the aspect of the value creation, and all agents actually create value as part of that and receive value as part of that. And we define the value creation in terms of the efficacy of the work. We talk about in terms of efficiencies. And again, that helps to build the scale and sort of decrease and mitigate the kind of complexities that are involved in this work. And then it really, really amps up the impact, both the impact to the learner, impact to the institution, as well as impact to the employer.
And Adrian, we've got another question. Is going back to that one slide that you just showed. Do you have some specific examples that can lend to how this can start to work together, just to give some concrete idea for folks?
Yeah, so many of us are or have been or are contemplating work around competency-based education. Again, very much a modality of experiential learning. And in using competency-based education models, for example, when I was at Southern New Hampshire University, we had employers that we're actually able to break down internships and job assignments into skill sets and competencies. And so we worked with them to actually develop the appropriate assessment and the evaluation of the achievement of those competencies. And so in that modality and in that work, you and as well as it was credit bearing as well. And so the accomplishment of that project or that competency, you had credit that went along with that. And so that credit then built into the degree. And so you graduate with an associate's or a bachelor's degree, and it's all competency based. It's employer recognized, it's industry validated, and it's higher ed accredited. And so you have all dimensions of that, along with the flexibility for the learner of all the other pieces that I talked about before, where they actually get credit for skills that they've already achieved. And so it really helped to further the process, speed the process, and decrease the cost to the learner as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I believe is the next slide Josh's slide. And so we will kick over to Josh for Josh to start presenting.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Adrian. I think, Mara and Adrian have really framed the challenges very well and outlined some different ways to approach solving for those challenges. And so I'm going to really zero in then on Ripen and the opportunity that we see to be one of those solutions. Certainly not the only one, but our approach, I think, is one that works quite well to meet learners where they are, which is really what this is all about, I think, at the end of the day. I'll start. I think this slide that you're looking at now really is a good segue from the previous sort of ecosystem kind of approach that Adrian was speaking about, and kind of how we think about that here at Ripen, where really what we are doing is we are bringing together those putting the student at the center to bring together industry, to bring together workforce development initiatives, and to bring together the academic side of things to be able to provide experience that meets learners where they are. That's really what everything that we do is all about. So to tell you a little bit more about Ripen and then give you some examples, I'll just kind of start with what our mission is. We're really focused on underemployment, which Mara spoke about earlier. Ripen started about 10 years ago. Our founders were in grad school in Canada and had themselves several opportunities to do co-op experiences, but really looked at some of their peers who didn't have the same opportunities and thought, how do we make sure everybody has opportunities to experience? You can't get a job without experience, but you can't get experience without a job. How do you solve for that in flexible and scalable ways? And that's really where the idea that has become Ripen was born, was from trying to solve for that and mitigate the underemployment that persists if you don't. So really, Ripen is a very mission-driven organization in trying to solve for that problem. The way that we do that is really about flexibility and scale. So Mara alluded to this earlier, that internships, apprenticeships, those are really the gold standard for experiential learning, but they are difficult to scale. They are resource intensive. There are challenges on the employer side to be able to participate in those. It's not just about institutions and their ability to scale them. It's about also scaling the availability of opportunities on the employer side. So we have to have then more flexible and more scalable ways to do that again, meet learners where they are. And Ripen, that's really what our approach is to be able to provide an opportunity that solves for those issues of flexibility and scale. Just to sort of set the stage, we have been doing the work that we are doing, which I'm going to talk to you more about for several years, and we are doing it at scale. So I think that's really the point of this slide is to show you that we are supporting tens of thousands of individual student experiences a year here at Ripen, and learning from that to help make it better every day for what we're able to help our partners do. We have partnered with hundreds of academic institutions to be able to do that. You see a bunch of the logos of our US-based partners here on the screen. A lot of what we do is embedded in the curriculum. That's our most common model. I'm going to talk about a couple of different models here today for how we partner with institutions. But ultimately, a lot of what we do when we talk about meeting learners where they are means not asking them to do something on top of the work that they're already trying to do in their program, but instead bring these opportunities into the program. So a lot of what we do is embedded in the curriculum, where students are earning credit to be able to do an experiential learning project. And so to that end, we work with thousands of educators that are academic partners to do this kind of work and to give them the support that they need to be able to teach a course that includes an industry project. And then I alluded to this earlier when Mara had posed the question that one of our audience members asked about small and medium-sized organizations. Really, where Ripen started to be able to provide a solution to our partners was to build a big two-sided marketplace. So one of the key barriers to doing project-based kinds of work like this are just access to projects themselves, access to companies that are able to provide projects. And so that was really where Ripen started, was building a very robust employer marketplace that is now more than 44,000 industry partners across North America and really across the globe. The vast majority of those are small and medium-sized. As I said before, a lot of nonprofits and charities, those kinds of organizations. The Ripen model is a good fit for them. A lot of those kinds of organizations would love to work with students in some capacity, but they can't take on and properly support an intern. So working with students in a project-based format to solve for real challenges they have in their organization, that's a good model for small and medium-sized organizations. Also a good model for learners, as we're talking about, meeting them where they are. And so that model we have found to be very successful. And so I just wanted to point that out, that number 44,000, that is by and large small and medium-sized organizations. There's a lot of text on this screen. I'm not going to read this to you, but just to kind of give you some of the highlights of how Ripen works. Ultimately, we are a very academic driven platform. So I'm going to give you some different examples here in a moment of different programs that we support our partners to facilitate. But ultimately, whether it's a project that is embedded in a course, whether it's something co-curricular, it begins by framing what does the experience need to look like for the learner. So that is up to the faculty member. That is up to our workforce development partner. That is up to the program coordinator to say, I want my learners to work in groups. I want them to do these projects individually. It's going to take them 10 weeks. It's going to take them 6 weeks. They have 40 hours to spend. They have 100 hours to spend. I want them to be doing projects in business or marketing or STEM, whatever the case may be. That gets created on the Ripen platform as what we call an experience, goes out to the marketplace to basically serve as a call for projects. So it's sort of the reverse of a job board, if you think of it that way, where instead of the employer posting an internship, here it is, students come apply to it. It's our academic partners that are saying, these are the kinds of experiences I want. And companies now, if they hope to work with that class and those groups of students, have to have a project that aligns. They have to have a commitment to engage in the way that the academic partner is desiring, if they hope to be able to actually get matched and work with that group of students. So matching is really central to what happens on Ripen. The marketplace of those experiences, as I'm describing, that's where our industry partners are looking for good opportunities to submit a project. On the other side is the marketplace of projects themselves, that 44,000 industry partners I spoke about. There are 3,000 to 4,000 projects available all the time on the Ripen platform, constantly turning over. We also help our partners to really make it easier to develop those kinds of projects from their own network. Most institutions have many faculty already doing this kind of work, doing it in an ad hoc way, typically. They're doing it with their Rolodex, their local partners. They manage that in spreadsheets and Google Forms. So part of what we also aim to do at Ripen is to provide structure to that, because by adding structure, you can do more of it. And by adding structure, you can better measure the outcomes associated with it. So there are tools to make the intake of those projects easier. And then the oversight, the managing of the actual collaborations easier and more structured as well. So once the matching is done, that's what happens on the Ripen platform. Those collaborations happen under the oversight of the educator, so that they can assess that work if it's a graded experience, so that they can offer support as those things are going on. There are a lot of tools in Ripen to really help make that very very seamless and give basically to the educator the sort of source of truth for what's going on in that project, instead of retreating to email and saying, hey, remember to BCC me on your communications. And then finally, that assessment and that reporting, as I alluded to. If you are sitting in a dean's chair or a provost chair and you want to know what work or what kinds of industry projects are we doing, and what's the impact that it's having on our students' career clarity, on their own sense of their employability. Those are the things that we are collecting in Ripen with the experiences that we run. We have partners that are doing pre and post project surveys to be able to demonstrate the impact that doing that project has on students' career preparedness, career clarity, those kinds of things. So that's really what the Ripen model is to help find and match good fit projects, oversee and manage and track along the progress of those projects, and then to be able to report on those outcomes and collect feedback at the end.
Josh, we have a great question that I really
Sure.
love. I'm glad it was asked. And I'm going to open it up for Josh, Adrian, and I'm going to answer a little bit as well. But the question is, how do we measure the success of work-based learning programs beyond just employment rates? And Josh, you spoke to this a little bit with those employability, but what other factors should be considered? And the reason I love this question is because I think a lot of times we try to and it's a human tendency to want to be able to have a simple measure for the effectiveness of education. You know, what's that ROI? And so we think about, well, what's their salary when they leave? But that takes out really important considerations of when students are serving in capacities beyond college, such as public service or social service. Those aren't necessarily fields which have a high rate of pay, but the impact on the community and society around is humongous. And so thinking about how do we know what is the success of work-based learning, partially it is, are individuals, are they happy with where they are in their lives? Are they in a career in which they find fulfillment? Are they able to contribute to their communities in a meaningful way in which they want to? Those are those squishy things that we don't like to talk about as much because it's harder to understand. But that also goes along with, what are the employment outcomes? Are they in the certain amount of salary range? Are they in a job that's related to their major, which may or may not be an important measure depending on what that major actually was? I'll open this up for Josh and Adrian, but it's complicated, and I think there are a lot of different ways to measure it, and part of it is based on the goals of your learners. I think it's easy for folks to say these should be the metrics that we look at, but I think it's a lot more complex and really, really varies depending on program, learner, institution, etc. But I'll open up to Josh and Adrian for your thoughts as well.
I think Mara, you offered some answers in posing the question there, but I'll add just a couple of anecdotes from the Ripen side. A lot of what we look at is about employability, is about soft skill development, which, especially if you're talking about online programs, students doing programs self-paced, you don't have as many opportunities in those kinds of programs to facilitate group work, to facilitate things that develop soft skills. So soft skills are really central to a lot of the feedback that we collect on Ripen. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of Ripen projects are group projects, is because they do give students an opportunity to develop those soft skills. I think another thing that we try to do in some of our programs is we do try to measure employment outcomes where it makes sense. Not all of our programs are ones where the project is sort of the ultimate experience. It might be slotted in the middle of a program. The objective of it might be a career clarity kind of objective, that maybe I have to pick a pathway and I'm going to do a project that gives me an opportunity to sort of test out what I think I want to do. It confirms that for me, and now I continue. So employment in that case is not the outcome that you're trying to accomplish. But we do have many programs where that is an outcome that we're looking at, and we see we see very strong data in those kinds of programs that tells us, yes, there is a direct or an indirect impact on employment. So I think the short of it, from my perspective, is that it's different for each of our partners, what they're trying to accomplish. What we try to help them do is collect the data that's important to them, both from their learners and from their employers, so that they can properly measure it. And that, again, comes back to having structure for how you facilitate these programs. Adrian, I'll turn to you.
Sure. And again, I love the way that you queued it up, because it does allow for a number of ways. And again, this speaks to sort of the flexibility and adaptability, because it is individually based, different ways to understand or to assess it. So you heard me earlier talk about quality of life. And there are a series of measures and metrics under quality of life that includes physical health, mental health, economic, social well-being. So there are metrics under there that really help to understand the impact of experiences. From the higher ed or the post-secondary perspective, think about it in terms of post-secondary progression. You know, the ability for this work-based learning experience to not just further one's education, but you heard me before talk about retention, thinking about degree attainment also as that, the validation of the credential. And then another one that I would offer as a potential metric, or one that I've used and that could be used, is the decrease in debt burden, particularly for that related to the institutional cost. So if there's a way that on average learners are taking, your new learner on average at the institution is taking, 150% more time to complete a degree or credential, and you actually reduce that, then you've actually had a positive impact on the debt burden by decreasing. And so there are different ways in which you could assess and evaluate the impact of it.
Great stuff. So Mara, I think I want to be sensitive to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to go through the last couple things here just to show you a few examples, basically at lightning speed, and then we'll turn it back to you, Mara, to facilitate some continued discussion. But just to kind of bring this to life and show you some of the ways in which our partners are using Ripen to meet learners where they are with different sets of needs that they might have. This is UC Riverside is a partner where we work with their extension. So they are working primarily with working adults. Also, a lot of international students is one of their unique use cases. And international students have unique challenges in terms of access to experiential learning because of their visa status, because of what they're limited in their ability to do. So that is a population of learners for whom embedded projects in the curriculum where they're earning credit works very well. And that's something that UC Riverside has really leaned into. Another example I'll show you is, whoops, that was actually a live link to something. That's not what I intended to do. Another example that we see that I think is quite interesting is obviously when you're talking about embedding projects in a class and you're talking about changing the curriculum, there's a process for how that happens. It takes time to get that programmatic review done, to get it approved by faculty senate, all of those things. So what are other creative ways then that you can do it while staying true to these principles of let's have it be something that they can earn credit for, that counts toward their degree? One interesting thing that we really see a trend here are the notion of project-based internships. A lot of schools have a vehicle in their course catalog for an academic internship. And that is something where we are partnering with many of our partner institutions now to support doing more of those. In the case of you see UNC Charlotte and UVA here, really they are using Ripen to be able to help find projects that are more difficult for them to find, to be able to therefore offer more of these kinds of credit-bearing internship opportunities to their students. And those can take different shapes. At UNC Charlotte, it's a 1 credit project-based internship that they offer. At UVA, it's a 3 credit. And so there's a lot of information on this screen, but that means at UNC Charlotte, it's a 45-hour project equating to 1 credit. At UVA, it's a 150-hour project that's more akin to a 3 credit load. These are also ones where the Career Center is a key collaborator in both of these to be sort of the connective tissue between the academic department that might collaborate in designing what this ought to look like and industry to be able to actually facilitate these experiences. So that's another wrinkle here that I think is quite interesting. And then the last one that I'll share here is we see a lot of different interesting use cases relating to non-degree programs, certificate programs in particular. Although on the right here you see Springboard, that is a boot camp. And there are many institutions that are partnering with boot camp providers or offering their own sorts of boot camps. Where do you incorporate experiential learning components in those kinds of programs? We see different ways for how that has actually happened, but one that I think is interesting is the notion of taking a certificate program, completing the certificate program, and then having a sort of ultimate experience, a capstone, if you want to term it that, to now go and apply those skills that you've just learned, so that at the end, what you leave with is a credential, also an experience, and the feedback that comes with that experience. That becomes a pretty powerful combination in terms of what you can go put on your resume. Again, different flavors of that here. At Georgetown, those were professional certificate programs. Springboard is a boot camp provider. And at the University of Virginia, it was actually Google certificates that they were offering to learners. And then the learner could do a project after completing that Google cert. Lots of interesting different shapes that we see those things taking. But again, a good fit for a project-based format. And Mara, I think the last one here is if you want to speak to what you've been doing with Complete College America.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Yeah. And so this program's a little bit different than a lot of our programs because we are responding to a moment in time is how we think about it. In our mission to make sure that we eliminate underemployment, we have to think about what is happening today in the world around us and how do we do that with our education partners. And so actually we worked with Complete College America. As we all know, generative AI is exploding. Employers are wanting these skills. We know that those institutions with resources are able to develop more on the AI front, whereas institutions where you have 17 corners to a desk and you're trying to work on it on the side, there's less accessibility or availability for staff and resources to be able to develop out those programs. And so one of the things that we really thought about with Complete College America is how do we create an AI readiness consortium that benefits not only our institutions and their students, but also those small and medium businesses that we talk about. As we talk about their barriers, AI is a barrier for them as well. They also have limited resources and capacity to sit down and think through how are we going to use AI in the workplace to not only further our business, but to maybe even help us grow, help us thrive, really think about how can we serve better than what we're doing today. And so this program is working with 5 community colleges listed here and local employers in their communities to support both, to think about AI readiness, AI competencies, how to utilize it in the workplace, and how to make sure learners are building those skills and competencies while they're still in school. And so we're doing that through experiential learning, where those employers and those faculty are working together, thinking through those AI competencies. And then the students are working on real world classroom projects utilizing AI in order to build up those skill sets, really giving students access to that real time competency building, which we feel is critical today. What our large concern is that we're going to see an AI divide, just like we've seen a digital divide, a technology divide, all the divides. We're worried that AI is going to be the next one. And so how do we really level set and eliminate that? And so as we think about how we serve that space of experiential learning, it's not just how do we support programs, it's also how do we support these things that we see happening in the world around us, and how do we make sure we're bringing those supports to our institutions as they're trying to respond to these as well. And so it's very exciting to be able to launch programs like these, and we love to connect with folks who are trying to think about how do we solve these big, hairy problems in our world? How are we partners in doing that, and how can Ripen help serve that space? And so really appreciate all the questions that we've had so far today. We're kind of coming up a little bit close on time, so I want to go ahead and kick it to Q&A, see if we can get a couple of the questions answered that we have that folks are sending in. And so I want to get some of these answered if we can quickly. First question that we have that's come up is, what types of programs, academic programs, work best in project-based learning? And I'm going to say the ones you don't think about work just as well as the ones you do think about. We also have quite a few programs in humanities, liberal arts, where we're really thinking about that social impact side of experiential learning, and how do we make sure that those incredibly valuable lessons and values and competencies that learners are learning in humanities and in liberal arts and in general education, how do they connect those to the real world? Because we think there's a piece where they're not connecting to, this is what it looks like every day for me to use these skills. And so those we utilize really well in project-based learning, just like the ones that you think are really effective project-based learning. But I'll kick it open to Josh and Adrian to be able to answer that as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. There are all kinds of disciplines and skill sets, projects that really fortify that. I've even seen through community-based organizations that are working with middle school students, where they'll actually do an ELA project where they'll take a poem, let's say, and deconstruct it and rebuild it in a way that is truly applicable to today, and then utilize the tenets of that poem as a way to engage with around community engagement. And so it has a social impact dimension to it that you just talked about, but it's also very skills oriented. So it's yes, 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 all of the above.
Okay,
Maybe
then
just one thing
right.
I'll add on is I think Mara alluded to this already, that we have some really interesting projects going on right now looking at incorporating work-based learning in the arts and humanities, for example. And so we also do a lot of very obvious things like business programs, IT, and computer science. But I think what it comes down to are skills. What skills do you want learners to develop? And when you start from that standpoint of what are the skills we want them to be able to apply when they are doing a project, you could have any kind of business project really that allows them to develop critical thinking skills and problem solving skills and those kinds of things, which I think are central to the outcomes we want of all learners. So I think starting from that standpoint of what are the skills that we want learners to apply, that then allows us at Ripen to help map to, okay, great, what kinds of projects can be well suited to help learners to do exactly that. That's the approach that we take.
And I have one last question. That's a great question that I want to make sure Adrian has a chance to answer. And this one is for Adrian. So Adrian, based on your extensive breadth of experience and just how you serve the education space, what are some of the most effective strategies you've seen campuses do to really create programs that serve their learners well?
Yeah. Well, in my 30 decades of doing this work, we will not live that one down. Some of the most effective strategies that I've seen are both a series of inputs and outputs. So one is literally building and designing around the learner first, and understanding who your learner and learners are, and understanding what their interests and what their needs are. And so you saw the graphic that I created earlier that really helps to position that. And then you build the structure and the ecosystem around that. So that's one. Two is it relates back to the last question, which is realizing that it's about skills and not just about the content itself. And so when you build and design around skills, that really helps to drive the connection between the interest and the learner perspective, as well as the employer and the institutional perspective. The third thing that I've seen that has been really truly effective is being able to cultivate and manage partnerships. And so, again, I used the analogy before, actually a true life example, where oftentimes employers and institutions, as well as the learner, may not speak the same language, although we're talking about some of the same things. And so really having a structured way of managing those relationships so that it truly is a partnership amongst partners. And then the fourth thing that I would say is this is a little bit more sort of technical, is understanding the assessment and the evaluation process. So how do you know that a skill has been achieved? How do you know that a project, quote, a project is successful? And so really understanding how to validate the attainment of those skills and those competencies and the translation of that in terms of whether it's employability, in terms of credit, however you may want to assess it. But those are the four things that I've seen that are real sort of success markers.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We are now at time and we want to be able to respect everybody's time. And so unfortunately, we're going to have to close this, but it was a great discussion. Thank you for all the questions that came in. There's also some additional questions that we're going to reach out to folks afterward and make sure we get answered for them. So that way we don't have anyone who has any lingering questions left from this. We appreciate you taking the time with us to really be able to engage in this. It's such a critical topic right now that we're all working through. And as always, we are here to serve with our partners as well as Adrian. And so feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.